Welcome to the Exploring Surrogacy Options webinar. My name is Lauren Muscarella and I will be your moderator this evening. Today you'll hear from Brett Griffin-Young, International Outreach Associate and Father through Surrogacy, John Weltman, President and Founder of Circle Surrogacy, Colin Rogerson, he'll go over the UK legal experience, and Simon, one of our intended parents from the UK.
So we're going to get started, and Brett is going to take the reins and go over everything.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for coming to join us this evening. As my lovely colleague Lauren introduced me, my name is Brett Griffin-Young. I am the International Outreach Associate here for Circle Surrogacy. I'm myself based in the UK. However, at this moment in time, I'm actually in the office in Boston. What we're going to be covering off this evening is, first and foremost, Circle Surrogacy's history and background. Then we're going to look at gestational surrogacy versus gestational surrogacy with egg donation. We'll look at the process, the different programs that are available, and I'll give an overview of surrogates and egg donors. I'm then going to hand over to John Weltman, who will cover off the legal work, some of the costs, the financing and insurance. And then we're going to be, as Lauren mentioned, handed over to Colin, who will talk about the legal aspect from the UK perspective, and then we're going to hear from Simon and hear about a recent Circle parent and his experience with the program and what it's like to be daddy to a, I believe, 10-week-old baby now. I saw Simon last weekend and he was looking surprisingly awake for someone with such a tiny baby. Right, there will be more information available in our free individual consultations that we offer. John and myself will be in London offering these consultations on the weekend of Friday, the 23rd of September through Sunday, the 25th of September. So if you are interested, please do get in touch. My email address will be available to you at the end of this. And we will be emailing you a copy of a link to this webinar so you can listen again. And obviously that will contain my email address. So do feel free to get in touch if you do wish to learn a bit more via a private one-to-one consultation. Right, so let's kick off with about Circle Surrogacy then. It's one of the oldest and largest surrogacy agencies in the world. We've had over 1,200 babies born. John Weltman, who is our president and founder, is recognized worldwide as an expert in reproductive law, including surrogacy and gay parenting. He began his surrogacy legal work back in 1992, when I believe John was about 9 or 10 years old. He founded the agency in 1995, and he himself is a father through surrogacy ×2. Why Circle Surrogacy? Well, when my husband and I were looking at different agencies, these were probably the main reasons why we chose to work with Circle ourselves. Circle offers a guaranteed baby program. There's a real security with the insurance coverage when you work with Circle. I think for European intended parents, dealing with US insurance can be quite terrifying. But there's a real feeling of security with Circle Surrogacy around the insurance. We offer unlimited IVF programs, unlimited agency coverage, an emphasis on known egg donation. And we also insist upon a relationship with carriers. This is something that's really, really important. It's something that if you do decide to have a consultation with, I would go into more detail with you around the relationship with our carriers. There's ongoing support throughout the process. You're never really left alone. And we think long-term. Before you sign up with Circle, we're looking at what your end result needs to be to make sure that we get everything right on the way. 3 components of a surrogacy journey. Number 1, communication. We are big advocates of communication at Circle Surrogacy, and then there's communication between yourselves and Circle, communication between you and your donor, between you and your carrier, between you and your IVF clinic, and so on. If you're going to have a successful surrogacy journey, you need to have communication. And you need to have trust in the professionals that are helping you achieve your dream of having children. And the most important thing is number 3 has the letting go of control, which is probably one of the hardest things ever. Again, these elements of the surrogacy journey is something that that myself and the lawyer would go through more detail with you in a consultation. Gestational surrogacy versus gestational surrogacy with egg donation. I think the clue is kind of in the title there, but I will go through this information with you. So gestational surrogacy is where the intended parents provide all of the needed biology to create the embryos. They just require the assistance of the gestational surrogate. So you would be matched with a A gestational surrogate that meets your legal, psychological, and emotional needs, but you would be providing the egg and the sperm. Gestational surrogacy with egg donation, again, clues in the title here, but it's selecting an egg donor from our network of egg donors, agencies and clinics, and then matching you with a gestational surrogate that meets your legal, psychological, and emotional needs. So the surrogacy process starts with the consultation. Once you've decided to join us, there's an official welcome, and you're introduced to the program coordinator and intended parent support teams who are going to help you through the process. Clinic choice, if you need to choose your IVF clinic, that's something that you would be assisted with. Your egg donor selection, again, if this is needed. Then there is a matching process and the journey coordination. So as you go through this journey of becoming a parent, everything is coordinated along the way for you. So the program coordination starts with that welcome that I mentioned. That's, welcome to the intended parents, the gestational surrogate, and the donor where necessary. And then your coordinator is going to do the connecting of the various parties through the process. So, for example, given here is sort of insurance, clinical, legal, that sort of thing. They're also going to coordinate the travel for the gestational surrogate and the donor, and manage the payments for the gestational surrogate and the donor, and also help with the hospital preparation, amongst many other things that the wonderful coordinators here do. So let's just talk a little bit about the surrogates then. What sort of women that we're looking for to be surrogates here at Circle? Well, first and foremost, we've got very, very high standards. There's a picture here of one of our lovely surrogates, Jenny. We accept roughly 1 to 2% of applicants who apply to be surrogates. And ideally, what we're looking for, primarily what we're looking for, is women who want to help others. That is their main motivation. Just some of the other highlighted requirements that we have: they have to have a healthy BMI within your clinic's guidelines. They have to be aged between 21 and 41 years of age. They have to have given birth to a healthy child, at least one healthy child. They go through full psychological screening, medical approval. They have to live in a surrogate-friendly state within the United States, and they have to have the support of their family and friends. And the really obvious thing, but it always comes up, is obviously not to use illegal drugs, smoke cigarettes, or abuse alcohol. Again, this is just very much an overview of what we're looking for in surrogates. If you meet with us in person, it's something, again, that I would go into greater detail with you. Our egg donors. So this is one of our egg donors. This is a lovely picture of one of our egg donors, Felicia. Some of the highlighted requirements for our egg donors. They need to be 20 to 29 years of age. They have to have a BMI no higher than 28 to 30. They have to have a healthy family history. And again, no use of any illegal drugs or cigarettes or alcohol. And they have to have a minimum of a high school degree. This slide just gives you a bit of an overview, or a bit of an idea rather, of how you can choose your egg donor, what sort of things you can look for. So you can filter things down to hair color, height, eye color, weight, age, and so on and so on. Now this is something you can do yourself. It's also something you can do with your egg donor team, where you can actually give them a list of your criteria, and they can start sending through some profiles to you for you to start having a look at. But this just gives you a bit of an idea of what sort of information you can search upon, and then obviously you can mark some of your favorites. You can come back and visit them, have a look, see what you think, and so on, and then start asking for further information on those particular donors. Right, so matching and types of egg donation. Firstly, we've got known donations. So this is something that I really believe Circle stands out from other egg donor agencies on, and it's the ability to offer known egg donation. Now what that really means is, with the known egg donation, you can exchange contact information with your egg donor, and if you choose, your children can meet the egg donor someday. As a parent to 2 children myself, I know how important it is for them to know where they've come from and to ask any questions they might have. The egg donor plays absolutely no role whatsoever in the parenting of our children, but they're certainly able to approach, my son certainly is able to approach and have a conversation with his egg donor if he wishes. Sadly, known donation, egg donors and intended parents exchange demographic information and have the option to have contact via Skype, for example, telephone, or at the fertility clinic. However, there's no exchange of last names or other identifying information. And then last, and by no means least, is anonymous donation. This is just where it involves absolutely no contact between the egg donor and the intended parents. The egg donor contract lists first names only, and all the information is exchanged through Circle. Our egg donors agree to keep us informed of all changes in their health and so on, and provide updated contact information, but you don't have direct contact with them. And finally, for my part, my story. This is a few pictures of my lovely children. My son Sebastian, who is almost 7 years old, born through surrogacy. He was born in Denver, Colorado through the Circle program. And my gorgeous daughter Georgiana, who we actually adopted when she was 7 months old. So I have 2 children, one through adoption, one through surrogacy. And very recently, we're in the very, very early stages of discussing number 3 through surrogacy. I think some people would think we're mad, but I would quite happily have as many children as I possibly could, but I will stop at 3. So that's my story. I'm going to hand over to John Weltman, who is going to go through all the legal, cost, financial, so on. And yeah, do you want to just bear with us 1 second? We just have to exchange seats, so hold on 1 moment.
Yes, now we'll hear from John Weltman, founder and president of Circle.
Honestly, that was the calmest I've ever heard Brett, and the least about Brett that I've ever heard him do a presentation. In fact, I think it's because we have Simon at the end telling his story that Brett told far less than he normally does. However, the third was news to me this morning, so I'm delighted. I'm John Weltman, and I'm the president of Circle. Because Brett didn't go on a bit, I'll do a little bit of John before we do a bit of legal. And because we have Colin here, I'm not going to do the British side of legal, so I'll do a little bit of the American side. First of all, I am a gay man. I have been with my partner for 34 years. We've been married to each other 3 times. We get legal till the 4th, which we didn't have to do again. And we were one of the first in the world to have children through surrogacy. Each of us has a boy through the same surrogate mother, so they're half brothers, but biologically and full brothers legally. I think that one of the stories I told about a week ago in the French webinar that seemed to be very much of interest to people was sort of life with children, because my kids are now 21 and 22. And I know I've got to keep this short, but I'm going to go through the sort of history real quick of things that have happened. I believe that this agency is about openness and honesty. That's probably the most important thing in the world, because it's how I've dealt with my kids' questions, which started around 3, and they asked, "Where's my mummy?" And I said, "California." And they didn't ask another question for 2 years. And then 2 years later, "Can I meet her?" And I said, "You already have." "Well, I don't remember. Can I meet her now?" And we spent a long time talking to her about what they call her and how much time we'd spend with her and who they could introduce her to. And I remember agreeing that we'd have them call her Susan. And the second day we were with her, Zachary was playing with a puzzle and said, "Mommy, can you help me with this puzzle?" And I gasped. And she said, "Well, you can call me Susan." And I gasped again. And then he said, "Well, Susan, can you help me with this puzzle?" And on my way home that time, he turned to me and said, "You know, she's not really my mother. She's more of my birth mother." And I thought, well, that's pretty smart for a 5-year-old, and you're right. It wasn't until 7 or 8 that I got the next set of questions when they opened the bathroom door and screamed, you know, "Which one of us is your biological child and which one is Daddy C's?" That's what Cliff gets called. And I told them, and they were both devastated for about 2 weeks because they liked the other dad better. And then the one who wasn't my biological child came to me and said, "But you're still my dad, right?" And I said, "Yep." And no question since, until 13, I think, when Zachary asked me if he was a bastard. And I said, "Well, what do you mean by bastard?" And I said, he said, "Were you married to Daddy C at the time you had me?" And I said, "Yes, I was." 20 minutes later, he came back and he said, "What do you mean by bastard?" And I said, "Was I married to your mother at the time I had you?" And he said, No, I don't care about that." So openness and honesty kind of works. My kids are 21 and 22, and I think they're pretty resourceful, confident young men who are doing very well. One of them just graduated college. The other one has got another year to go. First one has a job. The second one is on for graduate school, and just really feel very much at peace with who they are and where they come from, in part because we were open and honest. And there were never any legal challenges, which is what I'm supposed to talk about. So we have 8 attorneys here, actually, not 7. That includes, they're saying on staff, because I'm an 8th. In the United States, this is really the safest place in the world to come for surrogacy. Why? It's been around here for 37 years. I've been involved in it for 25 of them. And the basic law of the United States is, although we have what's called a federalist system, the concept is that each state gets its right to establish some law, and the federal government only really comes in if there's some constitutional conflict, like gay marriage. In surrogacy, the only constitutional issue is abortion that really relates, perhaps to some degree travel, but for the most part, this is a state-by-state designated issue. Family law resides in the state. Marriage does, adoption does, surrogacy does. So it depends on what a state thinks. And what state is it? Well, it's the state where the surrogate delivers the child that's most important. And there are 5 states that don't permit surrogacy: New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Nebraska, Washington State, and then also Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia does not permit surrogacy. So we don't get a surrogate who gives birth there. But we're kind of hyper-focused on getting everything 100% right. As Brett says, we guarantee babies. So we want to guarantee your legality. So we're not going to take a surrogate who lives in one of those states. We're not going to take a surrogate who plans to travel to one of those states. And we're going to restrict her travel during the last 3 months of the pregnancy to even visit you if you want to come to New York and visit her. Too bad. Ain't happening. But depends on your situation. There are more like 9 states that are good for single women who want to use an egg donor and a sperm donor. There are about 20 to 30 states that are good for gay men or heterosexuals who are using an egg donor and a surrogate. We know all these things, and we'll be working with Colin as well to talk about whether you need a single woman or a married woman. But all those things are going into place before we match you in the first place. The one thing I didn't get to on that last slide was the great thing about the United States is if you're in a state where surrogacy is legal, the moment she signs the contract, the baby's yours. It is not waiting until the child is born or even conceived to be yours. It's yours before it even exists in this world, and she cannot change her mind. And no surrogate has ever changed her mind successfully in any state that's legal for surrogacy that I'm aware of in the 23 years since the first gestational surrogacy case arose. Now, it is our job to represent you once you sign with us. But I must be honest in saying before you sign with us, you must get through our screening process. And when we're doing our screening process, we're first looking out for the best interests of the child, making sure you both, if there are 2 of you, really want a kid. Or if you're alone, who's your support system to raise this child? Because a child isn't raised by anything other than a village. And then how are we going to treat your surrogate? We want these godlike women to be treated respectfully and with support and thanks and appreciation. And then how are you dealing with this as a couple? We don't want to do the best thing for one of you and end up in a divorce situation. So we're going to take you on after you've passed those 3 thresholds. And once we do, we're stuck with you. We can't sign a contract with a surrogate. We have to have you sign that contract with the surrogate because we're representing you. And we want to make sure that it's a fair contract. So we're going to give you an initial draft that really has stood the test of probably 35 years and been updated, but it's a pretty darn good contract. That doesn't mean you can't change it. You can edit it as you choose, and we're negotiating that both with the surrogate and with the egg donor if you have an egg donor involved. And ultimately, we want to supervise making sure you get the parental rights you need, which Colin will talk about how to obtain that in the UK. I have already talked about that matching stage and how we go about doing it. I've talked a little bit about the contract stage. Let me tell you a little bit about the legal work stage. So even though that's your baby from the time she signs the agreement, the hospital isn't just going to accept the fact that you've signed some agreement with her. They're going to want some judge to say, yep, it's a valid agreement, it's binding, you accept it, put their names on the original birth certificate. Well, in order to do that, some of the states say, there's no chance you can change your mind, so I don't need to wait for the baby to come to make a decision. I'll give you a pre-birth order, and you can go on the birth certificate. In some cases, even if you're not genetically related to the child. The other piece, though, is that some states will say, if there's no baby in existence, I can't do this pre-birth. I have to wait for the baby to come post-birth. Well, interestingly, though I think everybody would normally think, well, let's all get it tied up pre-birth. That makes it all easier. It isn't always best, because more often than not, if you're looking internationally to get a surrogate to cover your children, then she needs to be presumed, at least, to be the legal parent without paperwork done to terminate her rights in order for the child to get covered under either an Obamacare child-only plan or her own private insurance. And so those are the sorts of things we're also looking at, is whether she's from a pre-birth or a post-birth order state and what's best for you. Because if you work for an international company that's offices in the United States and you have a global plan, I don't need that. If you work out of the United States, I don't need that. But if you don't, I may. Costs, okay. So giving you figures on costs is a challenge for me because it's so dependent upon what program you are and choices that you're going to make along the way that actually have nothing to do with Circle, more about which doctor you choose and which donor you choose and which surrogate you choose and where they live and what their travel is, and it's all and what their insurance is like, and it's mostly third-party costs that create the range. But essentially for those people doing just an egg donation, which would be a heterosexual couple, 17 to 40,000, good estimate. This is everything included. Not your travel, but everything else, the doctor, the insurance, the travel, everything. More like 90 to 110. If you're just using a gestational carrier, this can be a gay or a straight couple. Straight couple would obviously be using their own eggs, probably, or a friend's. That can work for a gay couple as well. You can use a friend's, a sister's, whatever. Then you'd just be signing us up for surrogacy. And then more like 130 to 160 if you're looking for a surrogate and an egg donor. And as I said, this covers everything. The only thing that should be an add-on is if you have twins. Then, generally speaking, the surrogate gets paid about an extra $10,000. And we do have those costs on our website, so please feel free to look. Insurance, the nightmare of my existence. I don't know how to express to British people or anybody from anywhere else in the world how awful the American insurance system is. It's a nightmare, and you can't believe it till you get into it. Effectively, just think of an entity who gets paid to not pay out. That is the principal way in which insurance companies make money. They take your premiums and they find 100 exclusions they've written not to pay out. And then on top of it, they delay payment. They ask hospitals questions. They wait a year before paying. It's a nightmare. It's the biggest negative in the United States. But in 21 years of doing this, we have never had anyone leave paying more than co-pays, co-insurance, and deductibles, which usually end up somewhere between $0 and about $4,000. It is a small amount of money that is always involved in the American system. When I had a kidney stone in London and went to University Hospital, I still had to pay for my medications. I didn't have to pay for anything. That was amazing because I'm not a British citizen. They never charged me. But I did have to pay for the medications. So the copay is like that. You pay the doctor $30 when you go and visit him. Deductible is like before you deliver your baby, $1,000 goes, and then the insurance company will pay the rest. It's basically another way in which insurance companies cut down on their costs. Obamacare has not made this better. Don't let people make you think it does. It's made it better, and it's made it more available, so every woman has to have maternity coverage, but they have kept raising the deductibles. They have a poorer program involved, and so it requires someone to supervise that. We are the only agency I know of that supervises this. We have staff who are medical billing specialists. We have outside third-party administrators who works with Lloyd's of London, who are third-party administrators. We have 8 lawyers on staff, half of whom all they do is fight with insurance companies who come in at the end and say, no, I'm not covering that, even though we've read the contract and they have to, and we win all the time, but we still have to do that. Most other agencies will tell you that's your job. And if you go fighting with insurance companies, good luck to you. You could easily get stuck with a $25,000, $50,000, $1 million bill. That's never happened at Circle. So we're going to look at that insurance before you have your surrogate. We're going to make sure we feel there's coverage and that we're comfortable standing behind it, or that she can get an Obamacare plan. And we also will get you complications coverage for the IVF, as well as life insurance for the surrogate. Now, when we're in London, we would love to see you. As Brett already told you the dates, consultations are much more personal and much more detailed than what we're doing today. It's still pretty much of an overview. And we want to hear your story, your situation, so we can address it with you. But if you're not free that weekend, don't worry about it. We do these things by Skype all the time. Brett is around to pick up the phone and chat with you about stuff, and there's a chance for you to ask your own personal questions in private. I am, the UK events have been listed, and I'll leave those up for you, but I think I'm passing off to Colin. Okay?
Thank you, John. We're just going to pass the presentation over to Colin, and he's going to get started in 1 second here. Take some. Colin is over in the UK, and now we have Brett in the office, so we were able to do the first part all in Boston. So we'll just be 1 second.
Okay. Is that up, and can everyone hear me? Yeah, so I, as John said, I am a solicitor in London, and I specialise in children law and in the law relating to surrogacy and assisted reproduction. And a large amount of my practice is spent in the High Court in London, hanging around with babies, and someone now knows me as the lawyer who hangs around with 2 men and a baby in outside Court 33 of the Royal Courts of Justice. And so I'm going to talk about the legal issues in England and why there is a role for an English lawyer in surrogacy arrangements where you enter overseas. But before I start, some of you may have heard that surrogacy is being looked at by the Law Commission in the UK. And that's something that the Law Commission has just started as a result of a case which challenged one aspect of our surrogacy law, and the government conceded that the surrogacy law as it currently stands is incompatible with the Human Rights Act. So what the government have done is they've invited the Law Commission to look at surrogacy and to provide a report to Parliament, but the law hasn't changed, and we don't know when the law is going to change. I imagine it's going to be a few years from now before anything comes about. So for most of you, the law probably won't change within the timescales that you'll be looking at. So I'm going to talk about the law as it currently stands.
Colin, before you get started, we can't see your slides yet. Have you?
Oh, you can't see the slides?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I should have shared them.
Yeah, we can see them. Fantastic.
Yeah, sorry. I'd not pressed the right button. I'm so sorry. I hadn't actually started my slides, so that's very convenient for you to tell me that. So yeah, so the legal issues to consider. This is for anyone living in the UK who is considering entering into international surrogacy agreements. Now I represent clients in a few domestic surrogacies, but mainly in international surrogacies. Most of my cases involve American surrogacies, which is where I feel more comfortable dealing with the applications. It is really the easiest country to go to for international surrogacy because there are lots of legal issues that can arise in some of the other destinations. But the first thing you want to think about is how are you going to get a British passport or an EU passport, or potentially a passport of your nationality if you're not British. Will your child need a visa? Wills and estate planning. Most agencies, most reputable agencies, I know Circle has a requirement for this, they will require you to have a will in place before they allow you to sign on with their agency. so that things are covered in terms of payments to the surrogate if anything would happen to you. And also you want to appoint guardians for your children if anything would happen before your children became 18. And also if something happened before you acquired parentage under UK law, you want to make sure that your guardianship takes and that anything that you provide for in your will identifies your children in a way that would be compatible with a surrogacy arrangement. The next thing to think about is who are the legal parents. Our law doesn't recognise in the UK any foreign court orders or foreign laws that establish parentage in, for example, California or Massachusetts or Texas or Colorado. English law will still apply regardless of what the court in Colorado says or California says. So you need to establish your parentage under UK law. The first thing I'm going to talk about is some of the nationality and immigration issues. Now, I'm not a nationality or immigration lawyer. We work very closely with one who is very experienced in surrogacy, and I know that the legal team at Circle also use the same lawyer. But I do have an awareness of what the UK immigration issues are. And different countries have different laws about who they consider to be a citizen. One of the major benefits of surrogacy in the US is that currently children born in the US on US soil are entitled to a US passport. The position is different in other countries. So third world countries that used to allow surrogacy, India used to be a big one, not so much anymore because the laws have changed, but India doesn't give children born in India a passport. So at least if you have an American passport, you have a passport on which your baby can travel and into the UK, even if you haven't established your child's nationality immediately from birth. Whether or not your child is entitled to a British passport from birth depends on the marital status of the surrogate and the status of the commissioning parents. So the marital status of your surrogate will impact on whether or not you're able to get a British passport, if you're talking about British citizenship for your child, from the moment of birth. In most cases, you can work quite happily with a married surrogate. It's just that you need to use a different route to get the parentage. I always think it's worth checking if you need to work with a married surrogate or an unmarried surrogate, and Circle are very good at contacting us at the matching stage to say these are the circumstances. Are we okay to work with a married surrogate for UK law purposes? And like I say, 99% of cases, it is completely fine for you to work with a married surrogate. A lot of people think from the outset, oh, I'm not going to work with a married surrogate, but by doing that, you're effectively cutting off a huge pool of potential surrogates, and it might increase your time unnecessarily, so there are ways around it. It's certainly a good idea to contact an immigration lawyer before you sign the surrogacy agreement, particularly if you're not British yourselves, if you're an EU citizen, etc. Because we just want to make sure that the transition or any kind of visa process or passport process is smoothly run. It's much easier to get these issues sorted out in advance before your baby's been born, rather than to have your baby be born and then try and work out the visa routes or passport routes at a later stage. Yes, the wills and estate planning, as I've said, most reputable agencies will require provision to be made in the wills to ensure that all parties are protected in the unlikely event of a death during the surrogacy pregnancy. Existing wills may need to be updated to include certain clauses. I know Circle has a number of requirements for their wills, and you may want to appoint testamentary guardians. It's really important that your wills lawyer is aware that you're doing a surrogacy arrangement, and they need to be aware of the specific legal issues that can arise in surrogacy. For example, there is almost inevitably going to be a limbo period in the UK from a legal perspective where you're not recognised as the parents of your children, and so the generic formulation of words and that most will lawyers will use when drafting a will, like referring to your issue, meaning your child, will not necessarily apply, and if anything were to be challenged on your estate, then that could cause problems later down the line. But I'm going to concentrate on legal parentage in the UK. And the law in the UK will not necessarily recognise any form of parentage orders obtained in the country of birth. And under English law, a child can only have 2 legal parents. And English law dictates that the child's mother, who is defined as the woman who gives birth to the child, so this would be the surrogate, even if it's a gestational surrogate, so there's no genetic link at all between the surrogate and the child, or even if in some heterosexual surrogacy cases where there is a completely full genetic child of the intended parents, where the intended mother's own egg is used, the surrogate will still be the legal mother of that child from birth. And so an egg donor, equally, an egg donor will never be considered as a legal parent in the UK. If the surrogate is married or in a civil partnership, or the same-sex marriage, then her spouse or civil partner will in most cases be the second legal parent. The only way that the spouse or civil partner of a surrogate will not be a legal parent is if the surrogate is separated and the spouse or civil partner have no knowledge, or the test is that they did not consent. How you prove that's up for grabs, but it would usually be if they've separated. And if the surrogate is not married or in a civil partnership, so if she's legally single, then the intended father with the genetic link can be considered a legal parent under English law. It doesn't necessarily give them parental rights, but it means that the intended father, if he is British, can pass on his British citizenship to the child automatically from birth. So that's where the distinction between a married and an unmarried surrogate comes in for nationality purposes. Parental orders are the English parentage orders specifically designed for surrogacy. They are only available where a child has been born through surrogacy, and they are designed to establish the legal parentage of the intended parents to the exclusion of the birth parents, in quotes, in that the surrogate and her husband will have their legal rights and legal parentage removed by the English court and vested in the intended parents. It's like an adoption order. It has the same effect as an adoption order, except it is designed so that intended parents through surrogacy do not need to go through the adoption process. Parental orders, as I said, they're only available in surrogacy arrangements. In order to get a parental order, there has to be a genetic link between at least one of the intended parents and the child. So currently, parental orders are not available where you are using a donor sperm and a donor egg. It is perfectly possible to do that in some of the states in the US, and there are many cases where intended parents, for whatever reason, can't use either the intended father's sperm, or either of the intended father's sperm and or the intended mother's egg. At the moment, that class of people are excluded from applying for a parental order. That is what a lot of people are now advocating should be amended in the new law when it comes back from the Law Commission. And again, parental orders are still only available to couples. In the news, there has been a case which was the case which sparked the Law Commission's review of surrogacy, where a single commissioning parent challenged the prohibition on single applicants applying for parental orders, and said that it was contrary to his human rights because it was discriminatory. And the government conceded that the law was discriminatory. So this is the one area where we can be really confident that the law is going to change. But unlike the US Supreme Court, the court in the UK, when it declares a piece of legislation to be incompatible with human rights or unconstitutional, it doesn't strike down the legislation. So the legislation still stands. It just means that the government needs to review and consider making changes in light of that declaration, which is what's happening. And both of the commissioning parents must be over the age of 18. The application for a parental order must be made within 6 months of the child's birth. We're not expecting this to be around for much longer. In fact, since 2014, the courts have been allowing parental orders to be made outside the 6-month time limit. A couple of months ago, there was a reported case where parental orders were made in relation to twins who I think were 12 and a older sibling who was 13. So the 6-month time limit has really gone by the by, but it's still good practice to get the application in as soon as possible and preferably within that 6-month time limit. And again, the child's home must be with the commissioning parents at the time that the application for the parental order is made. One of the requirements which can be an issue, particularly if the intended parents, if you as intended parents aren't British yourselves, or if you're British expats living overseas, is the issue of domicile. And I've just noticed that the Isle of Man is spelled wrong on my PowerPoint, so please forgive me for that. But it's effectively where your home is. So if you're born in the UK to British parents, you have what's called a domicile of origin in the UK. Only one of you has to be domiciled in the UK. So quite often there is, in a couple, you have a British, one British intended parent and an intended parent from another country whose domicile of origin might be, I don't know, France, Germany, Italy, Sweden, Brazil, wherever. You only need to establish the domicile of one of you. It doesn't matter whether that intended parent has the biological link or not. We just need to establish one of the intended parents' domicile. And the surrogate has to consent, and if she's married, her husband has to consent to the making of the parental order. And in the case of the surrogate, the consent isn't valid unless it's given after 6 weeks post-birth. So we have to prepare some consent forms, and because it's the US, they have to notarize their consent. But it is important to keep track of your surrogate, which in an American arrangement, that's fine because the agency is very professional, but it's something if you were thinking of going elsewhere that you would need to really be careful about, because there are lots of problems in some of the third world countries where consent becomes an issue because they can't trace the surrogate after the event, and it becomes very expensive. The final main thing that the courts are looking at is the issue of commerciality or payments. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what the law actually says about surrogacy in the UK. Commercial surrogacy is illegal in the UK. By commercial surrogacy, what we mean is really paying agencies to facilitate a surrogacy arrangement. It's illegal to pay lawyers in the UK to draft surrogacy agreements, and it's illegal to pay agencies to match, which isn't the case in the US, and it's why there is such a strong surrogacy practice in the US. But the court's looking at the payments that are made to the surrogate and to the agency, and the court has a power to authorize any payments that are in excess of out-of-pocket expenses. And so there will be, in an American arrangement, various payments that do exceed out-of-pocket expenses, because commercial surrogacy in the US or in the states where it's practiced is lawful. And so what you have to do is extract what's an expense and what isn't an expense, and then ask the court to authorize those payments. Now, it can be quite daunting with it being a asking for authorization after the event, but the reality is that since 2008, the courts have authorized payments in every case that's come before the court. There has not been a case yet where the court has failed to authorize a payment. And even though the courts have set down the tests that we need to look at when authorising these payments, it's really a misnomer, because we're looking at whether the intended parents have been open and honest in their dealings. And I've acted in cases, I acted in a case last year where I actually represented the children because it became so complicated because the intended parents had lied about the amounts that they'd paid, which really put it in conflict with what the cases had said. And yet the court still authorised the payments because the court is guided by what is in the best interest of the child. And the argument always is, if you do not give me the legal rights in relation to my child is going to be living with me without me being able to meet their day-to-day needs, and you'd be punishing the child, which isn't in the best interest. So best interest always is the paramount consideration. And so unless there is something grossly manifest, which wouldn't happen, I can assure you, with a Circle surrogacy arrangement, you're not going to have a problem. The next thing I want to talk about is the circumstances when you might need to work with an unmarried surrogate. It's always best to ask the question because it's a very simple answer, but it's a very important answer. You don't want to go down the road with a married surrogate if you fall into the very small category of people who should have worked with an unmarried surrogate, because it can have huge consequences in terms of citizenship and the types of orders that you could get if you're not going to be eligible for a parental order. So at the moment, it is, I would say it's crucial if you're a single commissioning parent to work with an unmarried surrogate. That is likely to change because that aspect of the law has been found to be not compatible with the Human Rights Act. We've got no timescales about when that's going to come in. My feeling is that they've kicked the law into the law review into the long grass by looking at much wider issues in relation to surrogacy and other forms of assisted reproduction. So we don't know when this is going to come in, so you want to make sure that you're able to get a passport for your child without difficulty. So single parents still want to work with an unmarried surrogate. The other reason is if you're not going to be eligible for a parental order for any reason. So for example, if neither of you are domiciled in the UK, or if there is no genetic link, it is always best to work with an unmarried surrogate, because particularly if you're not domiciled in the UK, then one of you is going to be a legal parent, and then we can use other mechanisms to get you legal rights and secure your legal rights in relation to your child as much as possible. But in most cases, as I've said earlier, it doesn't matter if you work with a married or an unmarried surrogate. So that really brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any emails, or in charge of answering any emails. I'm happy to have initial consultations. We don't charge for our initial consultations, and we do work quite closely with Circle, often during the matching process. I often get emails from their attorneys just emailing to say, this is the situation we have, are we okay to work with a married surrogate? Yes, no. Will these people in broad terms be able to get a parental order? Yes, and that is, for us as lawyers in the UK, that's really reassuring, because we tend to get involved at the end of the process, and so Circle is really good, I'd say the best that I've come across in asking those questions. They all know what they're doing anyway. John Weltman, Dean, they all know what the English law says, but they'll still ask the questions from us just in case there's been a slight change in the law, and they're very good at asking those questions, just so that they know you've got all of the protection, and so I would have no difficulties at all working with Circle. Okay, I am going to pass you back now.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. That was great. We're going to take the presentation back, and then we're going to hear from Simon, who's going to tell us about his experience as an intended parent with us. And like Brett had mentioned, he has a 10-week-old at home. So, Simon, are you all set?
I'm here, yes.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Hi. Great. Hello, everybody. Yeah, it's I've actually just been listening to what everyone's been saying with a smile on my face, really, because we sat. Actually, it was 2 years ago when we started. We sat listening to Colin and to John and to Brett, to everybody, and it's just really, I don't know, it warms my heart thinking wherever you all are in your journey. I don't know whether you've made a decision to do it or whether you're just kind of putting out feelers. Before I say anything, all I want to say is do it. I promise you, it is singularly the best thing you will do. I've actually got an 11-week-old. She's going to be 12 weeks on Friday, and she's the greatest achievement of my life. And both Ron and I are absolutely thrilled. And yeah, it's you, as like people said, I mean, you think you love your partner, and you know you do, but you don't really understand love until you have a child, and it's unbelievable. So yeah, I'm still high and I've got baby brain, but I will try and talk. What I thought I will do is just briefly go through our journey. So mine's going to probably be a bit more emotional rather than factual, but it's just quite interesting to kind of have that kind of like, you know, sense of, you know, somebody else's journey. So we decided surrogacy. Ron, my partner, is French. I'm British. He had made a decision actually before we met that he always knew that he would like a child, and he'd looked into surrogacy. To be honest, when I found out the price, I was like, my God, I was kind of slightly blown away, and was trying to push for adoption because, you know, Ron earns more than I do, but it's a lot of money. You know, for me, it's a lot of money. So we actually went to something called the Alternative Parent Show, where we saw many people, including John and Colin, speak, and I wandered up to this stall where we actually found Brett, who was just standing there, and they had lots of people that were basically adoption agencies, all sorts of things, and it was a really good day, and we got to talk to lots of people. On the adoption front, we spoke to somebody who basically kind of said, it's not the 60s, you're not going to get a little baby, you're probably going to get more likely 2, 3, 4 plus that's come from a lot of problems, mum's a crackhead, blah, blah. I hadn't really thought about it. Clearly these children need homes and need to be loved, and absolutely, you know, adoption is a great thing, but Ron and I thought actually we would like a child that actually is genetically part of us. We thought it's one thing being part of a gay family. I know things are different to when I was a child, but you know, we are still different, and it would just be good to not have added problems of you know, on that, and to be able to say that, you know, you came from us. So that's why we decided to go from surrogacy. Circle was actually the first agency that we met. We had a consultation with John and with Brett, and it all seemed great, but obviously, you know, we wanted to do our due diligence. We wanted to see if we could get it cheaper. We wanted to see if there was a better service, and we did our due diligence massively. I mean, we interviewed, and I'm not joking, possibly around 30 agencies. When you do this, if you may have done this already, one thing, you will be shocked at how everybody tells you something different. Picking up on John's point, I personally was particularly obsessed with the whole insurance thing, because obviously in the UK we have this wonderful thing called the NHS, and we don't have to think about it when we go to the doctors or whatever. But in America, you know, the idea that if you have twins and they're born early and they have to go into the NICU, I mean, you know, you could be racking up millions, I mean thousands and thousands of pounds, and you know, we wanted to have a baby, but we did not want to have to remortgage our house or come back and find that we had nothing left because we'd spent everything on, you know, not having insurance. So we this was a big obsession, and we interviewed so many agencies, and literally they will all tell you something different. From Circle, from one end, that will say it's absolutely fine to use the surrogate's insurance, and I will come back to that because the Circle are correct. But with agencies that said to us, actually, that's insurance fraud, and you could be taken, and you know, you start hearing this, and then in between everybody says something different. There's I'll warn you, a lot of agencies that don't know what they're talking about. I mean, it got, it was quite American. We'd do a Skype and they'd be there going, hey, you guys, you're going to have a baby. And I would cut to the chase and say, yeah, before we start about that, can you just tell us where you are about insurance? And of course, they want to talk about the agency. And anyway, basically, we were very confused and we took a year. In fact, we got to the Alternative Parents Show the year later when everyone was kind of, we were a bit of a laughing stock because everyone said, have you guys not made up your mind yet what to do? So eventually we decided to go with Circle for the reason that they were the only agency out there that there was about 3 or 4 that said you can use the surrogate's insurance, but Circle were the only agency that really made us feel confident. I mean, John literally gave me his mobile number and said, you call me if there's a problem, and really backed us up, and you really realise that it is a service. I mean, the lawyers will go through these contracts, and so we were so thrilled that we did. Now, in retrospect, I think I was a bit over excitable about the insurance because it's not, when you get out there, actually, us Brits just do not get it. It's an American thing and we don't understand it. So our journey was actually very smooth. We didn't have many bumps in the roads from that point of view. But just coming back to choosing Circle, we're really glad we did because we've been fully supported, and not just legally, but the team. I mean, things kick in. There's moments after you've been matched and stuff where nothing happens for a while, and you start thinking, have they forgotten about us? And then the minute it's time, everybody kicks in, and you really are in good hands. We had an amazing program coordinator called Jenny. She was an ex-surrogate herself, so she understood it, so we could ask her questions, things that we were sometimes a bit afraid perhaps to ask our surrogate in the beginning because we didn't know her, and it was just, and even things like we wanted twins. We desperately wanted twins. We wanted the Disney family where one, we had a boy and a girl, obviously. One was mine, one was Ron's, and they were from the same egg donor and the surrogate, and we were this perfect family unit because that was the only way we could achieve that. We didn't have twins, which is fine, but at the time, I was a little bit upset, and the thing is, you don't want to sound ungrateful because you're pregnant, and it wasn't until literally I remember getting a text from John saying it's okay to be upset that you're not having twins, and I just was quite touched by that actually it is a big agency. They deal with legal stuff, but actually there is a personal touch to it, and I don't regret at all choosing Circle, and I would again tomorrow. So just the journey. So basically, you pay up your money, you deposit, and then you wait to get matched. Obviously, there's more if you're international surrogates. There's more to it. You have to wait for a surrogate that's got insurance. The day the email arrives with your surrogate is really quite strange, amazing and strange. There's a profile, and ours was called Ashton, and she had a little boy, and there's a husband, and you're looking at these pictures, and then you have an interview with your surrogate, and it's like a first date. I always try to make people laugh, and I carried a watermelon moments. And literally put the phone down thinking she's going to hate us. What made it worse is at the time Ron, my partner, was away, so we had to Skype not being together. But we got matched, and actually she loved us, and that was all great. Choosing the egg donor, again, very strange, because you're literally looking through profiles thinking, oh, I like her hair, she's got nice eyes, and I mean, there's no joke about it. That's what you're doing. Obviously, the main thing you look for really is if they've done it before and was it successful. I didn't understand so much why we did that. When you go down the journey and realize you take 3 months literally to match the 2 girls together, if our egg donor had dropped 1 egg, we'd have been devastated. Fortunately, she dropped 24, so we were quite lucky. You go through, we picked an egg donor, but just to be warned, you'll choose an egg donor and then you say we like that one, and you're in a queue of about 15 people that all like that one. Again, this is something we weren't expecting, so on that plan early, and when you're waiting to be matched, start doing your homework, start doing things then, because it's important. Anyway, we got a gorgeous egg donor. She's beautiful, she's clever, healthy family, everything was great. And then we decided, which is not necessarily what your advised to do, but we decided that we wanted to fly over and meet our egg donor and meet our surrogate. And again, do you know what? It's the best thing, particularly with the egg donor, because now our daughter's born, I know that she's got her eyes, and there's certain things I've only met her once, even though we Skype, but there's certain personality traits that when my daughter asks questions that we can answer. It's always been really important to us that Ines, our daughter, will not have questions. You know, she's going to know that she was wanted so badly. Obviously, clearly, we couldn't do it on our own, but we got two amazing women to help us. One's called Katie, who provided our egg, and one's called Ashton, who basically carried you. So we chose, when we went to meet them, it was very clear that both these amazing women were very happy to stay in our lives. Which is what we want. However long that will last, I presume, will be dictated by our daughter, but Ron doesn't want any secrets. So that was quite important. Anyway, I know I've only got 10 minutes. I'm going to try, and there's so much to tell on this journey, this amazing journey. So we went out there, we met, we then got pregnant. Again, it's the most amazing thing, but things go wrong in a surrogacy journey, and don't be afraid of that. You know, it's everybody always said to us, you know, things will go wrong and it'll be quite dramatic and you'll be quite emotional about it. And I thought, don't be silly, I'm quite calm about things, but actually it's true. We were put back because our surrogate she hadn't been inoculated against rubella when she was a girl, so that put us back 3 months. There was another part where the egg donor couldn't, she wanted to block out 3 months of the contract because she wasn't available. All these things happen. I used to be on the phone to Brett going, tearing my hair out, and all he used to say is, you'll get your baby. You'll get your baby. And he was right. We got our baby. We went 5 times. We went to meet them. We went when we were pregnant. We went for the first and the second scan, and we went for the birth. We built an amazing relationship with our surrogate. Again, and this is not just our surrogate. Surrogates can... We've made some, and you guys will do as well, and I don't know whether you're same-sex couples or different-sex couples, but you will make some amazing friends on this journey. We found a lot of other guys have found that the relationship sometimes with the surrogate can be a bit strange. It takes a certain type of woman to do this, an amazing woman. We had moments where we went over and she had terrible morning sickness. I remember the most miserable meal in TGI Fridays when she felt sick, her 2-year-old's throwing toys, and no one wanted to be there. You know, real kind of lows, and then amazing highs, like when our daughter was born. When we went over for the birth, we had an elective cesarean, and actually our daughter came 10 days early. I went beforehand, and he literally arrived on the day she was born. So she's here. At no point ever, Ron and I have worried ever about our surrogate wanting to keep the baby. When you read the contracts, your contract with Circle, you will feel protected. I mean, it really is heavily swayed in the for the intended parents. Aside from that, you can always pick up the phone. Your program coordinators, you're always Skyping with them. You can ask as many questions as you want, and Circle have really gone out of their way to kind of put us in touch with people, with other couples, and it really has been the most amazing journey of our whole life. And now we're at the other end. We're at this awful bit where we're now trying to sort out the parental order. Just a bit of a word of warning, the people that work at the family court are not the most efficient, and you will jump through so many hoops on this. Even back in the US, we in the hospital, they only wanted to give us 3 bracelets because you have one for the mum, one for the dad, one for the baby, but there's 4 of us, so you'll jump through hoops there. We had a problem about they would only allow one of us in the room during the C-section. We had a big row about that. We won, and then eventually didn't because the anaesthetist had a bit of a problem with it. There's so many hoops you will jump through, but enjoy the ride. My advice, go more than once, go more than twice if you can, because this journey will be an amazing thing that you do, and at the end of it, you're going to get, your life will change absolutely for the better. As I say, we have no regrets with the decisions that we made, and even when things seem really, really bad and you think, oh God, this is awful or whatever, just remember the words of Brett, you'll get your baby. And we did. And so, yeah, I'm going to kind of finish up there. Again, I'm happy to answer as many questions. I'd love to meet you all, and I could talk to you for hours on everything, but I only have 10 minutes. So maybe in London at some point, if we'll get a chance to meet and ask different questions. But, do it. It will be the best decision you've ever made.
Thank you so much, Simon. As Simon said, we're going to start with questions. We have a couple right now, but if you have more questions, please type them in right now. The first question is actually for Colin. Colin, are you ready for a question? I know that you might be on mute, so we'll...
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted now.
Sure. The question is for you. Both myself and my partner are living and working in the UK. However, none of us is domiciled here. I have dual citizenship, US and UK. Will we face any legal challenges in the UK court?
Well, if you're not domiciled in the UK, then you can't get a parental order. So we would need to look at different types of order. And if you're not domiciled, then you would need to work with a unmarried surrogate, because we would be looking at securing your parental responsibility and securing orders which prevent the surrogate from exercising her parental responsibility. So, I mean, I'm happy to give more detailed advice, but there are other options if you can't get the parental order.
Kevin, hopefully that answers your question. If not, please feel free to clarify or ask a further question as you did previously. Simon, there's a congratulations from a gentleman called James. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That was really great. I'm glad I paid you so much money to give me such a good reference. You really did a good job, especially about me.
No, I meant every word. I meant every word.
So where are my Harry Potter tickets?
Don't worry. I'm on it. I'm on it.
Sure. I want to see you anyway.
Right. We have another question here. This is for Colin as well. For a couple both domiciled in the UK, is it better to go for a married surrogate or an unmarried surrogate?
If you're both domiciled in the UK, it doesn't matter. It's slightly easier to go with a unmarried surrogate just because the passport issue is more straightforward and there's less work to do in relation to that. But I would, in that situation, I really wouldn't let the marital status of your surrogate be a veto for who would otherwise be the perfect surrogate for you to work with.
I think I just would chime in, this is John talking, that about 28% of our women are single and the remaining 72% are married, so that it is a little more challenging to match with someone who wants a single surrogate. It's just harder. We're looking for a support system, someone who can watch her kids when she goes to the doctor's office, things of those nature, and so it's just a little more challenging. But so most of my UK couples, since the law has changed, have been fine with either one, and I think that's obviously entitled up to you. If you choose a single, it's fine, but I think from what I've experienced with Colin, he's won every single one for us, married or unmarried.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. There's been no more questions yet. We'll leave it open for a few more minutes just to see if anybody else wants to ask any questions. I did want to mention, though, John and myself will be in London, as I said at the beginning of the call, on Friday the 23rd of September through Sunday the 25th. On Friday the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at the Charlotte Street Hotel, we'll be hosting a drinks reception with one of the doctors that we regularly work with, and we would be delighted to meet you there. Just send me an email if you are interested in attending, and I will give you some more information, but it will be a chance to meet us in person. It's not going to be as formal as a consultation, but you certainly may wish to move to a consultation after meeting with us, or maybe you just want to come along and ask some questions and meet us all. You'd be most welcome. So do feel free to email me for more information. That's Friday the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at the Charlotte Street Hotel. Right, I've got some more questions coming in here. from birth, what is the typical timetable bringing the child to the UK, getting the visa and the parental order? Well, that's sort of a multi-part question.
Well, generally speaking, I would say that the timetable from the time you sign up to baby is about 18 months. I think it can vary from as low as about 15 to as high as about 21. And certainly 1 to 2 years is not unheard of. But I would say that plus that, you're going to talk about at least 6 months, wouldn't you say, Colin?
Yeah, so the parental order, most people, and John, you all know this, I think most people returning to the UK can normally travel after the 2 weeks because you'll be able to get the US passport, and 2 weeks is normally the time that the time that medical clearance will be given for you to travel.
Assuming you don't have.
You would then need to sort it. Sorry.
Assuming you don't have twins, which can spend that time just in the hospital.
Yeah. But the parental orders, like Simon was saying, the family courts are not efficient in the UK, and so I would say the application from start to finish takes around 6 to 8 months at the moment on average. Some come slightly under, some go slightly over.
Can I make a comment as well on that, if that's okay?
Please.
Yeah.
Well, just because this is what we're doing at the moment, and we are a little bit on we want to travel, and so we want to get her passport as soon as possible, and we're a bit impatient. We've taken a lot of advice from a lot of other now parents. We know some friends that have done it in 3 months with twin girls. What you have to do is you don't leave. You just have to keep phoning people. The first person that you speak to at the family court is the most inefficient person. We were warned about her, and basically you wait 10 days. They take 10 days to contact you, and if you can't, when you call them in 10 days to wonder why that they've not contacted you, it's in the post room. There's all sorts of things, but there's things you can do. But at every level, phone CAFCAS, phone the court, and get book appointments. And apparently, it can be, if you're in a rush, done in 3 months. Well, it has been. That's all I'm saying. Sorry.
But Simon, I don't think you need to wait for parental order to get a UK passport. Maybe in your instance.
You don't. I mean, you can get one earlier, but it can become more expensive. So you have to make an application to the Home Office, which is about £900 to the Home Office. So it's quite.
Yeah, we're
expensive.
saving up. We're saving up for number 2. We can't afford that.
Yeah, no, yeah. But yeah, when you get the parental order, it become the child becomes British automatically. So most people prefer to wait for the parental order and then get the passport. But there are ways around it if you. If there is a pressing need to get a British passport.
Okay. Colin, this is probably going to be something that you'll need to answer again. We're a couple domiciled in the UK but might be moving to the US when we have our baby. Would it then be a problem moving back to the UK knowing that the parental order has to be applied for 6 months after the birth?
No, you can apply for a parental order if you're outside the UK. It just becomes a bit of a logistical obstacle, but we've overcome it a number of occasions because there will be certain times when you need to be in the UK as part of that court process, including with the baby. So it is possible if you're domiciled in the UK and you're living overseas to still apply to the UK for a parental order. You don't need to be here to actually make the application. You can do all of that by post. But you would need to attend at least some of the hearings, and you would also need to meet with a what we call the parental order reporter as well.
Colin is being also modest because I know he's accomplished this for 6 years after the child was born. So although the 6 month is the rule, exceptions have been made.
Yeah, and like I said, there's now a case where there's been a 13-year-old. So, although that wasn't me, but
yeah, I was just.
the courts are now getting easier.
All right, we have another question here. What are the practicalities involved in using an egg donor in the UK, but surrogacy and the gestation process through Circle in the US?
Well, from a U.S. perspective, you absolutely can use an egg donor from the U.K. in your process in the United States. The issue is that the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has rules about the testing that must be done on genetic material or the biological donor into a third party, namely the surrogate. And it must be that all the sexually transmitted disease testing must be done in an FDA approved laboratory. So generally either a box has to be sent over for the donor to supply her genetic material, her blood and samples to be sent to the United States, or preferably actually brought to the United States for that testing beforehand. But it's very doable. We do it all the time with sisters. We've had friends from the UK all the time. That's not an issue at all. We have someone who's written, and doesn't that assume one of you is the father, which seems to be a continuation from birth. What is the typical timetable bringing the child to the UK, getting the visa and the parental order? Obviously, you do have to, as Colin has said, have the child be genetically related to you in order to get a parental order. Isn't that right, Colin?
Yeah, there needs to be a genetic link at the moment.
Okay, another one. Sorry, I think it was Simon who did this before. How many times did you travel back to the US during the pregnancy? Simon, I believe you traveled 5 times? Simon, are you still with us?
Sorry, Brett. I've just come. Sorry, I've just come to deal with my. Can I come back to you in a minute? I'm just got a crying baby. Sorry.
I'll give the standard answer, and then you can give that.
Okay. All right. So just to put in perspective, it's I guess you could say how long is a piece of string. For my surrogacy journey, I visited 3 times during the pregnancy. Simon came over 5 times. I know some people come over twice. The standard is usually 3 times. You'd come over for the initial testing. You would come to visit for at least one of the scans, and then obviously to be here for the baby. Would that be the standard?
Yeah, I usually like to say 4, but I think that I usually say that if you can combine the testing for yourselves and the meeting of the surrogate and the donor on one time, then it certainly can be 3.
So sorry about that. I'm back now. Sorry, she was kicking off, and my mum was with her next door. I just had to deal with it. I'm really sorry about that.
That's all right.
No, actually, if people now realize they've all disappeared because they don't want a screaming infant.
So what was the question, or has it been answered?
Yeah, we've answered it as well. But how many times did you travel back to the US during the pregnancy?
Yeah, I was saying it 5 times. So you don't need to. I mean, you literally can just go once for the birth. But I appreciate that people are spending lots of money on things. All I was saying from an emotional point of view is it is an amazing journey. And as happy as we are that, we have our baby, I'd do it all again. So don't not go. If you can afford to go more than once, go, because it's just, you'll never get that time back forming the relationship with your surrogate and possibly your egg donor. We did, and just, our surrogate was in Florida as well, so it wasn't a hardship being there because we had beaches and wonderful times. But from my point of view, if I was to do it again, I would absolutely go as many times and enjoy every step of the journey.
And can I give you a perspective on why this is so important to Circle? From a Machiavellian perspective, if you are nice to your surrogate, she'll do it for you again. And that's a pretty standard. But more importantly, she'll be there available to meet your children when they want to know who their genetic mother is, or their biological mother is, or their birth mother is. All those questions avoid the mystery. It's one of the wonderful things about surrogacy. And as my children have grown up, it's been so important that whenever they needed her, she was there. She's not an important part of their lives. They have 2 dads. If it's a heterosexual couple, they have a mom and a dad. If it's a single dad, they have 1 dad. But it's still a key person in their lives, and other people will ask about. And so knowing who she is important. And I think the same thing applies to the donor. children will have questions. They want to know what their genetic future is, not just their genetic past, but what can change and what that happens, as well as knowing that personality, that just natural by nature comes to them. And so it's really important. And I still have a relationship with my surrogate who I met in March of 1992. 24 years later, we still talk 3 or 4 times a year. We still see each other once a year. And it's very important to me. It's a life-altering human in my life. It's the goddess who gave me my children. And as annoying as they are at 21 and 22, I wouldn't give them up for the world. And I so appreciate what she did. So I think it's hugely important that people establish those relationships, because it's good for you, it's good for the child, it's good for the surrogate. My goodness, what she's doing is out of the goodness of her heart.
Right. Do we have any more questions from any listeners? Right. I think that's it. Thank you all very, very much for listening. A very special thank you to Simon and the guest appearance from his daughter.
And sorry about that. And thank you. And we will definitely be at those drinks.
That's how Brett signed up the next day, was a screaming baby of Scott.
Right.
She's not normally like that. That's very rare.
That's lovely. No, thank you for giving up your personal time on a Wednesday evening for us, Simon. And likewise, Colin, thank you very much for all your input and answers and giving up your Wednesday evening for us as well. We really appreciate that. We will be emailing you.
Thank you for the comment. Really great webinar.
Oh, thank you.
I like that.
Please feel free to email me back once you receive the email with the link to this. If you are interested in the drinks reception, if nothing else, come and have a glass of wine on us.
Simon, we're expecting you.
Yeah, Simon, we are expecting you.
We'll be there. We'll be there.
And the screaming baby. Yes, thank you all very, very much. Take care.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.